Welcome to Mom and Mind, a podcast about maternal mental health from conception to pregnancy and postpartum. Real stories from moms and family members who have made it from struggling to wellness, and interviews with experts and advocates who work for moms and families to get the help they need. We discuss very real struggles that can sometimes be hard to hear, but these are stories that need to be told so that moms and families can know that healing is possible. This podcast is meant to offer information and awareness and is not a replacement for treatment by a professional. Thank you for being with us today. Hi, and welcome back to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. I'm very honored and excited to have the super awesome Aarti Sequeira on with us today. She is here to share her personal experience and journey through postpartum depression. And now she's become a very powerful advocate for maternal mental health after her experience. She competed in Cutthroat Kitchen's Superstar Sabotage Tournament, and she chose Postpartum Support International as her charity for donation. As a result, she has helped raise awareness of postpartum depression and the importance of maternal mental health. She is in the documentary called When the Bell Breaks, a documentary on postpartum depression, and was a keynote speaker at the PSI conference this summer. She is well known from being on the Food Network and for two other things: spinning her Indian soul into American favorites and her laugh. Armed with both, the former CNN producer won Food Network star, going on to host Aarti Party, a cooking show that grew out of the popular blog and YouTube show shot in her kitchen with actor-director husband Brendan McNamara. Her cookbook, Aarti Party, ranked in the top 3 Indian Middle Eastern cookbooks on Amazon. A judge on Guy's Grocery Games and Clash of the Grandmas, she also contributes to Unique Sweets and competes on behalf of Postpartum Support International, the organization that helped her on the road to healing from postpartum depression. Catch her on Today's Show, The Talk, Dr. Oz, and her podcast, Pass the Salt. She lives in Los Angeles with Brendan and her 2 daughters, Elia and Moses. Welcome, Aarti. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It's awesome.
Yay!
Yay. So we were chatting a little bit before we started how cool it is you're willing to share your personal experience and how helpful I know that it is for people who need to hear themselves reflected in your story. So I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's funny because I started off as, my calling in life was to be a journalist. I grew up during the Gulf War and I was in the Middle East. And so like in my backyard, quite literally. And I remember watching the news and being like, oh, I want to be Christian Amanpour and I want to be, reporting the news because I want to be helping in some way, I guess.
Yeah.
Also, it was very glamorous to me and badass. I mean, let's not lie about that. Then I grew up and I went to university and I worked at CNN for a few years. And it's funny because at a certain point, just sort of lost my passion for that. I mean, I still do love the news and love journalists, especially most of them. But I think the thing that I was trying to do was just like at all times tell the truth. And in some ways it's just occurring to me now as I'm talking that aspect of whatever training I got as a journalist has continued, where you just tell the truth because the truth is always better. When I stopped working in news, I started writing on my blog, which is still in existence. And if you guys are ever so bored and want to go back into the archives, like I've always found a lot of therapy just for myself in just writing out what is going on with me. And it helps me sort of see things for what they are, see things that are true and valid and need to be sort of nurtured and nursed, and then see things that are just full on like either foolishness or lies. And so, in a way, when I got the postpartum depression and I was sort of dealing with it, and then even as I found, some recovery and relief, it was not even a difficult thing for me to talk about it, honestly. It's just a natural next step in this relationship I think I'd already created between me and people who read my blog and people who watch me on Food Network.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you have that. I'll call it a superpower. For a lot of people, there's so much guilt and shame and all of this other stuff that goes along with feeling anything but great and wonderful, especially as a mother. And I think your perspective and approach is part of what helps people get past that stigma and get past that feeling of shame. Is it like, hey, this is a thing that we deal with as people.
Yeah. I mean, it's been really validating. I get emails whenever Cutthroat Kitchen airs, the episode that I competed on and won for PSI. And then even now I've been competing on Guys Grocery Games as well, when they have special, like, you've been judging all this time, you do it now kind of episodes. And then, you know, I compete for PSI. I always get messages after those episodes from women saying either thank you so much for talking about it because it helped people that I know in my family and in my friend circles understand what I'm going through, or I didn't know that that's what I had. And after I watched you, you know, I went and got help, or I called PSI or whatever.
Yes.
That is huge. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of makes it feel like, okay, I'm using this career, which is very sort of me focused, for something that is like outwardly focused. And that helps me feel okay about spending so much time thinking about myself all day.
Well, and making awesome food too.
Yeah, I do try. There have been some bombs, I'm not going to lie, even just this week, but usually it's been okay.
Right. You being a public about went on for you helped in my community itself. I volunteer for PSI in San Bernardino County here, and I got a call from a husband and wife who saw you on TV and called PSI for help. They're like, oh, this is what's happening for my wife. We need help.
Oh my
and
God.
It was just like so powerful to get the call. Like, you know, like my mind was sort of blown at that moment. Just right after they watched, they called. And
you know, it tells you that TV is still very powerful, as much as like we talk about the internet, which is of course very powerful too. There really is something to seeing someone on TV. I actually even think that most of us put our TVs on a physical pedestal. You know, you're always like kind of looking up at the TV, and then here's this person, and if you have a big screen, they're like, their face is blown up size. So now they're giants. When they are open, I don't think there's any shame. When you're open about the things that you're struggling with, it has a huge effect on people.
Yeah.
And someone had posted this thing a couple of times. I've seen it from different women. This saying, like, you should at all times be like a duck, like above water, smooth and graceful, and below water, like paddling like the Dickens, or something like that. I don't know. Someone will tell you what it actually is. And that statement drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I think it is the most ridiculous thing. If you are having a hard time and you're working really hard and it's a struggle, why are you then going to add another layer, which is let me hide it? Because obviously there's something shameful about going through a hard time. When honestly, like, the thing that I've really been coming around to is, I think when we were little, we had this idea sold to all of us. Listen, I'm selling it in some way to my children too, that life is a fairy tale, that you work hard all the way through school and everything, and then everything works out. And it's not true. I mean, I'm a Christian, and in the Bible, it talks about that Jesus says, in this world, you will have trouble, but do not fear, I've overcome the world. If even Jesus is saying to you, hey, listen, things are going to get tough. I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying, I'm going through a really difficult time right now, and I need help.
Yeah, that this is one of the key things that I hear as a therapist with moms that I meet with, is this idea that, you know, I'm a bad mom because I'm not doing a good job. I'm not doing enough. And oh my God, what a burden.
Yeah.
It's a horrible feeling.
Such a burden. And I think especially these days when, you know, I don't know what it was like to be a mom pre-Facebook,
right,
pre-Instagram, but I think that all of these social media things actually seem to make mothering harder.
Yeah.
Because you're in a constant subconscious comparison battle. And I have a real problem with compare and despair. I have a real problem with that. And the thing is, if you're a mom and you're raising your children and you're sneaking in 5 minutes of escapism, which is what I do, just scrolling through Instagram, you're seeing all these happy, beautiful, well-lit photos of mothers and their children. You're like, everyone's smiling and everyone's happy and everyone's got it all together, you know. No, it's a moment in time, but it's so hard because all you're seeing is an entire feed of happy moments in time.
Right.
So sometimes I feel like my feed is a little wow, wow, woe is me, but I sort of feel like my purpose is kind of to counterbalance all the...
Right. And be real, be honest.
Yeah, just be like totally normal and real and just say...
I love that.
Yeah, it was hard. I think that one of the hard things was that I think giving birth is hard enough. And then, especially before your first baby, there's so much preparation for the birth itself. And then very little preparation for those first couple weeks.
Yep, hardly any.
Hardly any. And I really think that that needs to be part of your childbirth class is things, like a psychological aspect, like mama, here's how you're going to feel probably. Mm-hmm. And, on day 3 or 4, your hormones are probably going to drop out and you're going to feel really awful. Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, that's why we can deal with PMS is because we know it's temporary and then you're going to be fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
But nobody tells us, hey, remember your PMS? It's going to be 5 times worse. But normally, conventionally, it's only going to last X number of days and then you should be fine. If it continues to last past that, then you should seek out help. Like, I just wish someone had told me that.
Right. It seems like simple knowledge to pass along.
Well, I know. And I wonder if people don't do that because they don't want to scare moms.
I think so, but it's a disservice. Mm-hmm. For you, in your journey and in your experience, what happened? How did you know something wasn't quite right? And
so I got postpartum depression after my first daughter, but not after my second. Mm-hmm. So my first one, she's 3 years old now. The birth went nothing as planned, but big deal. That happens to everybody. I did end up having to have an emergency C-section, and I do sometimes wonder whether that had anything to do with it. Basically, what happened is that, I came home and, it's rough for the first few weeks because you're just getting used to this whole new person being in your life and her needing you at all times.
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of difficult. But the thing that I realized pretty quickly is that I didn't have that rush of, oh my goodness, my heart just expanded a chamber because there's not enough place to put all the love that I have for her. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't have a tumor of love.
Right.
And I could see that my husband did, and he didn't even give birth to her. So I was like, something's going on. And I would have a really hard time with her when she wouldn't comply. Right. And she's just a baby. But, if she didn't go to sleep or if she didn't feed or, I just felt like it was a personal affront to me because I was like, okay, I'm working super, super hard for you. I think that you're incredibly cute and I feel so responsible for you. And I do thank God for you because I didn't think that I could have a baby, but I'm having a really hard time because I don't feel affection for you. I don't love you.
Right.
And I don't think that that's right. So that was really kind of the big thing. And then it escalated because my husband, who is an actor, very smartly took a temporary production gig. What that means is a TV production. That means that he would leave the house at 8 a.m, maybe. Right. And then he wouldn't be home until 8:30, 9 p.m. So I'd go these long days, and it was also the winter, so they were dark days.
Oh boy.
All by myself. And I don't have family who live here, and none of my friends had babies. Mm-hmm. So I really felt all by myself.
Yeah.
With this child, this thing. And it just made it worse. I mean, I felt so alone. I was so tired. I cried constantly. I felt so guilty on top of everything because I thought I'm failing her. And I quite often would tell people, I just feel like she would be better off with someone else as her mom because I'm doing such a piss poor job of it. And then on top of that, she's looking at me and she knows that I don't love her. And what is the future for a child whose own mother doesn't love her, who thinks that she's beautiful and, all of that stuff. But so that kind of just kept going, and then it affects your marriage too. And my husband, you have not said one positive thing since you gave birth. Everything you say is negative. And I said, oh, well, that's just how I feel. Like I can't control that.
Right.
And then, or I don't feel like I can control that. It was just a very dark pit. And on top of the whole thing, you're thinking, oh God, I'm trapped. Like this is the rest of my life.
Right. Like that feeling is going to last forever.
Yeah, that this is going to last forever. And also that you're a freak because, then I did join a mums group and I'm looking at these mums looking adoringly at their babies. at every single like burp and noise that they make. And I'm like, no, I mean, I was very proud of my daughter. I thought that she was very cute, and everybody talked about how much hair she had and all that stuff. Like, I loved that, but I don't know.
Well, it's really hard. You mentioned several things that a lot of moms who are feeling this stuff feel, which is that like deep sense of loneliness, like that just doing this by yourself if you have partners who aren't around for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But there's this really fascinating way, we're so used to communicating and relating and talking and having people understand what we're saying, but nobody talks about that you're going to receive this human who cannot do any of those things, like this 100% being reliant on you. And it's such a shift to have to then find a different way to relate to somebody who can't give you anything back, really.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, it ends up feeling personal.
Yeah. And you feel horrible about it.
Yes.
You feel so horrible about it. And you feel like there's something wrong with you. One of the things I say is like, there is something wrong with you. You know, it's not that you are wrong. It's that something's not right. Like something's up.
Right.
And it's just like, if you had an ear infection or whatever, like you go and get some help for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was breastfeeding, and so I just didn't know exactly what to do. I mean, the one thing is that at the beginning of my pregnancy, I was so emotional that my friend, who is a psychotherapist, said, you should go and maybe go get some therapy, some cognitive behavioral therapy, so that you can sort of learn to undo those thoughts a little bit, like chase them all the way to the end kind of, and then ask the right questions so you can see them in the right light. So I did. Of course, by the time I actually had given birth and everything, I'd forgotten everything. Right. Couldn't really use any of those tools at that point, but I was at least aware, and so was my husband, of this thing called postpartum depression. My husband was actually really on top of it. He said, listen, you're sick. And that is huge. I think that's why I think with childbirth classes especially, it's very important to mention it, because the husbands or the boyfriends or whatever, your partner needs to know that this is something that can happen, and it isn't just that your partner is being stubborn or being lazy or checked out or whatever. It's not, that this is an imbalance, and that the right response in that moment is to say, let's go get some help.
Yeah.
Or, I still love you. I'm here with you. Let's figure this out together kind of thing.
Yes.
As opposed to you're wrong, what the hell is wrong with you kind of thing.
Right, which absolutely adds to the mom feeling horrible.
Absolutely. And what broke my heart is like, so one of the things that I ended up doing is one day I was sitting by myself trimming my daughter's nails, and I nipped her. And she wailed. And, when your nerves are so frayed, that then I started wailing, because I was like, I cannot even trim her nails without hurting her.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was even pre-postpartum depression, I've always had problems with a tape playing in the back of my brain saying, you're failing, you suck, you're failing, look, you can't even do this. Everybody thinks that you're ridiculous. Why do you even try? You're just going to fail. And then if you fail, what's the point of you even being here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then that was sort of, I sort of feel like the postpartum depression preys on that tape.
Oh, yeah.
And amplifies it. And then also, because it's an overachiever, it then adds to the tape too. So it's like,
Right, everything gets magnified to such an extent that it's so real. You're looking at things in such detail.
And so when that happened, I called the warm line at postpartum.net, and I spoke to somebody, and then they got me into a support group, and that kind of started the whole thing going. But I remember being at the support group and talking to women and just being astonished at how many women had such unsupportive husbands. I'm sure that they're lovely men. It's just that from their perspective, they were like, you wanted this baby, and now you're acting like it's the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And so from their perspective, they have no idea what's going on, and they're usually gone all day if they're working. So they leave in the morning and everything is maybe okay, and they come up and their wives are a big mess,
Right. Yeah.
I think they're like, you've just been sitting on your butt all day. Like, what was so hard for you? I've been at work. And so it's just like everything is so much worse when your best friend in the whole world doesn't see what's going on with you.
Yeah, it's devastating too. And feeling alone in your own home is that much harder.
Yes.
Feeling isolated and judged and whatever else is coming at them, weak or And that's why it's so, like you said, important for partners to really have a good understanding of what can happen. Not that it's going to, but that it can, and that they can help and look out for stuff, and then for them to not take stuff personally as well.
Yeah. It's funny because after I gave birth, he checked in, he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, go follow the baby," because she was covered in meconium and, they take her away and stuff, which is the polar opposite of what we wanted for our birth. So
Right.
he was like, "I'm going to go with her." And I said, "Yes, go with her." So she was crying and he put his hand on her and he was singing to her, and then she stopped crying and she got very calm. So he said, when I asked him, I said, "So when you saw her," because of course now he saw her before I did. That's the other thing that's so crazy about, C-sections. But anyway, I said, "Did you have that feeling that they talk about, that rush of OxyContin and, all you want to do is just love, love, love on her?" And he goes, "Well, I don't know if that's what I felt, but I did feel like the bubble around me of protection that encompasses me and you."
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that I was concerned with just protecting myself. Then I met you, married you, that bubble, grew to include you. Right. And then when I saw Aliyah, it grew a little bit more. And I was like, this is my baby and I have to protect her. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if other men relate to that, but, if that is the way that you understand your role in your family, then part of your role is to say, as the protector, mm-hmm. I need to protect my wife and my child here, and something is up. And I might have to step in and call out for help because she can't.
Right.
Or she feels ashamed to, for whatever reason.
Right.
It was really huge for me. Once he said, mm-hmm. I think something's up, then I felt like the door was open for me to be open with my friends and with my family. And even though I tried lots of different things before I ended up getting antidepressants, everybody knew what was going on. Mm-hmm. I feel so much better because I felt like I had all of these people checking in on me and praying for me. And, it's not the sort of thing that you can beat on your own.
No, absolutely. And having the social support is a really big part of feeling better. Sometimes the risk, some people will say that they have a lot of people around them. Mm-hmm. If you don't feel supported by those people around them, you might as well be alone on some level.
Yeah.
So, and by your example of sharing it with friends and family, hey, this is what's going on, or this is the kind of help I need, that kind of thing, and bringing them into the loop, you don't have to feel alone in their presence.
Yeah. I get it. I know some people are reluctant to talk about it because they feel their friends or their family are going to have a negative reaction. Then there's even more people judging you.
Right.
Obviously, you got to make your choices about who you divulge this information to.
Definitely. There are some people who will make it worse. So your journey through this, you sought help, you sought support. Along the way, were most people understanding, or did you run into some people who didn't get it, or providers who didn't understand, anything like that?
I remember that, I took my daughter to one of her monthly visits at the pediatrician, maybe her 1 month or her 2 month or something. And I'd always had kind of a weird vibe from this dude, even though on paper he was everything that I needed, which was, a doctor that was open to homeopathic medicine as well as regular medicine. Just because I was brought up in an Indian household, you always reach for like spices first or homeopathic medicine first.
Yeah.
And then you go to, so I just wanted to try the same thing. So, but the thing is that I don't think he has children of his own. And I do think that makes a difference sometimes, because he said, "So how are things going?" And I said, "Well, she's fine, but I'm not feeling so great." And so he was understanding, and he prescribed me a couple of homeopathic medicines that he thought would sort of take the edge off. Mm-hmm. He's like, "Oh, I give this to a lot of my mums when they're feeling stressed out." And I was like, okay. And so there was something about the tone and the verbiage that he used that made me feel dismissed. Mm-hmm. And I know that I have the power to just like dismiss it right back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think in that sort of weakened state, I just took it as, oh, look, even the doctor thinks that you're overreacting and you're having a pity. You know?
Right.
So I tried those. They didn't really make any difference. And then tried things like supportive things like diet and exercise, like trying to get outside in the sunshine. And that does really help every day if you can do that. But it only helps. It doesn't overtake whatever it is that you're dealing with. But it is a good practice to get into, even as you get older, as your child gets older, just to have that time to yourself. So I tried those things, and then it took my mum coming to visit when Alaya was about 8 months old for me to realize that maybe there was something else. Maybe it was time to take that step, because, my mum is an incredibly strong woman and prides herself on being a very strong woman, and sort of passed that on to us. And listen, that is because her own mother passed away when she was very young. She became the sort of de facto mother in her household to her sisters and her brother. And she has always kind of carried the struggles of the family on her back and sort of pulled us through. And so she kind of wanted that same thing for us. And that is an incredible quality. But, that voice was also in the back of my mind. Like, if you were just strong enough, then you would just get through this.
Ooh.
So when she came to visit because she was worried about me. And then after staying here for, I think, 3 weeks and sort of watching what was going on with me, at the end of it, she said, I think that you just need to go to the doctor and you need to just go get some medicine and just be done with this. Oh. It's been 8 months. You've let this thing rob you of the joy of your daughter for 8 months. Enough already. And I sort of nodded and I said, okay. I really think that was like kind of a pivotal moment for me. And I'm so grateful to my mom for like saying that, because sometimes I feel like you need permission.
Right. Especially with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think if that's, you almost need to like find that person that you need to have that permission from and have them literally say to you, I will not think any less of you if you go and get the help that you think that you need.
Right.
It was huge. And it still took me a little while to like line up an appointment, because I think the other thing is when you become a mom, you automatically deprioritize yourself.
Yes.
So, you're like just taking forever just to make the appointment. And then when I went to the doctor, she too was like, let's try some natural things. And I was like, I've already told you I tried them.
Right.
I was like, okay, I've held out for this long. Let me try these different things. They didn't make a difference. And so we just immediately started. And it was huge. I mean, it took a few weeks to kick in. And that's the thing. I mean, people say, oh, you just took a pill to solve your problems. I was like, yeah, you weren't there for the first 2 weeks when you feel actually worse.
Right.
And you are really doubting whether you should have jumped off the diving board into this world.
Right, but that's the kind of stuff that like makes me so mad. If you had diabetes and you were like, had changed your diet and were exercising and like drinking water all the time, wasn't helping, and you went to the doctor to get insulin, would people say like, you just took a pill to solve your problems?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but I think I say that, but I also do think that, when I was saying that postpartum depression preys on the tape that's already been playing in your mind.
Absolutely.
I think you do have to address the tape.
Definitely.
So, that I didn't do therapy in the conventional sense, but I go to church, I talk to my pastor. Like I had a lot of talking going on about those issues that the postpartum depression was like just feasting on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I do think that you should take a double-pronged approach, which again, like as a mom, you're like, oh, so now I also have to make an appointment every week to go talk about myself for an hour.
Yep.
This is very, very self-indulgent, but it's your health. And I feel like I have been a 200% better mom to Alaya having done that. I've enjoyed her. And of course she can see when I enjoy her, and you just see her blossom in that moment, so it's huge for your child. If you can't do it for yourself, then you have to think, okay, I'm doing this for my child.
Absolutely. And right. And that's a good way to look at it, because it's not, I mean, it feels selfish. And I think in some ways that's part of our conditioning, maybe as women or just maybe societally, but also to go, and if you've never been to therapy or talked about your stuff before, that can feel hard. But yes, going to address some of the underlying issues. And if you need to take medication to feel better, fine. Right, therapy or some type of support, some type of working through and looking at your vulnerabilities and addressing them is so powerful. And a lot of moms describe, if they stick with the therapy or whatever type of support that they're using, is that they feel kind of better than they did even before they had postpartum depression or anxiety, because they're also working on the underlying issues that contributed.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's part of maybe what you described as you were talking about seeing all of these things that were coming up as a new mom.
Yeah, I think that the medication for me helped me. It gave me enough of a lift so that I could actually kind of see the issues for what they were, as opposed to just being completely overwhelmed by them.
Yeah.
And never having any reprieve. Right. You know, so I always describe it as like, it wasn't, you know, suddenly I was pooping rainbows. It was that that I had been living under these gray, gloomy, stormy clouds, that the medication helped me just sort of, it was a step stool so that I could look above the clouds, remember that the sun was still there and proceed. Like the clouds were still in front of me, but you know, it was a reminder like, okay, this is what it feels like to have a little bit of hope.
Right.
For me, it manifested as hope. Like,
so good.
I remember I made a plan. For myself on the, you know, and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't done that in a long time.
Yes.
And, you know, it's not over. I mean, I'm on my second and I assume my last baby. And thankfully this time around, I didn't experience postpartum depression. I still was on Lexapro when I was pregnant with Mosey, my second. And I talked it over with my doctor. And I will say that my doctor was amazing because he was very conscious of my mental well-being throughout the pregnancy. And he said, listen, it would be ideal if you weren't on it by 36 weeks. And he told me this near the beginning of my pregnancy. And he said, I don't want you to stress out about it. I want you to talk to your doctor about it. If you would like to wean yourself off it, then please do. But the second that you feel bad about it, then call me and let's talk about it, because it's better that you feel good mentally and then we deal with the repercussions than, you know, you sort of gritting your teeth and white knuckling your way through it.
Right. And that's not good for either and anybody really. Yeah. You know, all of this is so powerful in terms of just, you know, as I said before, you sharing your story, and hopefully people can hear themselves in what you've described and know that it's okay to get help, and know that, you know, whatever path they need to take to feeling better is cool, but that it does need to be addressed on some level. And, you know, with all of the things that you're doing in your professional life, you're still being an advocate. You have so much going on from what it seems like on my end, on the being a judge on Guys Grocery Games, and you have your cookbook, and you have their Pass the Salt podcast. I'm sure that takes up some time. You know, but even people just being able to hear you do you and go after your passions in this way is uplifting.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, whenever I see people in real life, IRL, people are like, oh my gosh, you know, it seems like you have so much going on. And I was like, it does, doesn't it? Because if you came by my house at like, you know, 5:30 in the morning, you would see what it really is like. You know, it's very unglamorous and very much like any mom's life where, I mean, I'm really blessed because my husband is an actor. So Bren is home all day except for auditions and, you know, things that we're working on. So we get to co-parent and share I was going to say burden, but the blessed responsibility of, you know, of watching these two and making sure they don't kill themselves or each other. So in that sense, like, I feel like my life, I struggle a lot with, I read this phrase once, the unpredictable mundanity of these early years, where you wouldn't trade them for the world, because you know that it's good for them and you know it's good for you to be together and to be there and teaching and guiding and correcting and loving and, you know, having fun together. But it's also very difficult and it's very challenging, and it's also very hard to also keep your own things going and just keep it all juggled, you know, and I'm sure that's something that happens forever and ever.
Right.
But yeah, you know, I still try to do things once in a while. So like we do a podcast called Pass the Salt that's all about food meets pop culture. We had a really good episode, me and Bren, where we talked about, this me and my husband do it, where we talked about food and presidential elections. And how important it was that, like, you know, what impact did it have that Bill Clinton ate, his favorite food was burgers. Mm-hmm. That was really important because here's a Fulbright scholar who seems very like super intellectual, but no, he plays the saxophone and he eats burgers just like the rest of us.
Yes, right.
So things like that. We talk about that.
That's awesome.
And then my cookbook's still available through Amazon. The whole point of my cookbook, to anyone who doesn't know my style of cooking, is to simplify Indian cooking and take all the scariness out of it.
Yeah.
And to make it doable on a, weekly basis. When you throw pistachios, raisins, and ginger and garlic into your sloppy Joe mix, what happens?
Yeah.
So things like that.
Love it.
Yeah. So I'm trying to keep busy, and then hopefully we'll start shooting Guys Grocery Games in October. So then that will be the real juggle.
That's awesome. And so I would assume that everyone can stay connected to you through your website, artieparty.com.
Yeah.
And get updates from there.
Yeah. Through there. And then I'm super active on Instagram. You can always find me that way. I respond to every single message that I get, except for the spammers from Indian who just say, hi. That's all they say.
Awkward. Yeah.
So awkward.
That's funny. Right. So you're on Instagram, Aarti Party Pics, on Twitter, Aarti Party, and Facebook, Aarti fan page, and of course your website, artieparty.com. And we get to see you on TV and hear all of the, listen and see about all of the wonderful things that you're doing in the food world too, as well as the maternal mental health world. And I just love that your story is part of your life, because that's what it is. You've integrated parts of yourself in such a beautiful way. And I hope that, people can be inspired and be hopeful about your message and seeing you go on to do all of the great things that you do.
Thank you. Yeah. If anyone's listening, just know that this isn't the be all and end all. You know what I mean? This doesn't have to be forever.
Yes. No, it doesn't. And it won't be if you get the right help.
Yep. That's
Absolutely. True. I thank you so much for being on with us today. I just loved being able to chat with you, and I'm so glad to have met you and
you too.
And so thankful for all that you do.
Thank you so much, darling.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
By joining us today and listening, you're a part of the growing community of people who are aware and concerned for mothers and families during this beautiful and sometimes very difficult time of life. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this free podcast so that Mom and Mind can be found by moms, families, and providers who will benefit from hearing our talks. If you or someone you know is having a hard time, help is available. Please look for resources for help at momandmind.com, where you will also find links and information from today's episode. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Mom and Mind community.